Hi, my name's Yuri Bannons. I'm a doctoral candidate at Griffith Law School. My research is on the right to repair. Right to repair looks at the limitations to repairability in a lot of different consumer goods categories, like household goods, agricultural equipment, personal electronic devices, cars, and medical equipment. Repairability can be limited by the design choices made by manufacturers and by the software that's embedded in most smart goods nowadays. But also, legal tools like licensing and copyright can limit what we can do with our devices after we've bought them. Limiting repair costs money because consumers are often forced to dispose of and buy new devices instead of keeping their old devices around for longer. It also unbalances the market, giving manufacturers more power over consumers than they used to have. Obviously, it creates a lot more waste, and that's a serious issue for the environment. And ultimately, consumers become locked into a very harmful cycle of wasteful consumerism. The learning objectives of a session on right to repair with a STEM focus might look like this. From a science point of view, we'd want students to understand the energy and environmental costs of producing consumer goods and of e-waste. From a technology point of view, we might ask them to appreciate how everyday objects are dependent on software, which makes them harder to repair. From an engineering point of view, we can look at what engineering decisions like the types of screws and adhesives that are used influence the repairability of goods. And there are many things we can do on mathematics. For example, calculate the impact on e-waste streams if devices could live a little bit longer. What's an opening hook? How would you introduce the right to repair to your students? One way is to hold up a smartphone. Who owns one of these? Plenty of hands would go up. What are the things that usually break or need repairing on one of these things? Well, the screen often goes, or the battery. How much does a battery cost to replace? Can you do it yourself? No. You often have to take it to the manufacturer, and it can cost a couple of $100s. Screens can cost even more. The next question you could ask is, do you really own this phone? Of course, you can buy and sell the product, but what parts of it don't you own? Some students will recognize that the software on the phone is not yours. You're only licensing it, and there's a limit to what you can do with that software. We could take the discussion to a personal scale. What's the most recent device you had to replace instead of repair? What was the last time you tried to fix something at home? How did that go? Where would you go to get repair information? Did you have any trouble? Then we could take it to a school scale. What happens to our old lab equipment? How often does the school need to replace its computer fleet? And what happens to the old computers? And at a global scale, why do mechanics need laptops to fix a car nowadays? What happens to all our old smart devices when we're finished with them? And importantly, if there are limits to the repair that we can do on our devices, who benefits from that state of affairs? What we're hoping students will understand is that the way things are engineered and designed can limit and deter repair, and that computerization makes everyday objects even harder to repair. Things like copyright can be used to inhibit access to repair information. And limiting repair in the end costs us money. Also, consumer waste is harmful. There's no such thing as a way. There's only another here. One way you could look at repair is to create a report card. Students could identify common types of devices, create a set of criteria for their repairability scores, and then score each device according to the criteria they created. Here's an example. A discussion you could have about that is to ask them, why did they choose certain criteria? What gave it a high or a low score? You could mention that France has introduced a mandatory repairability label for consumer goods, a bit like the Australian Health Star rating. Do they think that's a good idea? Do they think it would change what people do? And should Australia do the same? What we're hoping that students will get out of a right to repair session is that repair is much better than recycling for the environment, and the repair limitations do affect their daily lives. Repairability is affected by design choices, by manufacturers, but also by the laws that exist in the country. And that repair rights can connect to broader economic and environmental justice issues. We also want students to understand that their choices matter. They do have agency in this system if they know what's happening. Some possible extensions for right to repair in STEM could look at calculating lifetime device costs with a longer lived device and a shorter lived device, looking at what industries create more e-waste in Australia. We could, from an engineering point of view, look at designing something for repairability versus designing something without repairability. And in a computer science point of view, we can look at open source software versus closed source software and modular software design to promote bug fixes and so on. I hope this was helpful to you to get you thinking about the right to repair and how you can introduce it into your classroom. Remember, we all have the right to repair.